Today on the Time Show, Budlight tries a bribe of $150 million to maintain shelf space and distributors. UAW Strike expands to the Dodge Ram truck plant. UAW October 20th live stream, but without censorship and with my charming personality. Maxim names a biological man one of the 100 hottest women. Jelly beans, well, the company has been sold. Geico announces a layoff of 6% of their staff. Chevron to buy Hess for $53 billion. And the Ford Mustang E-Mach is recalled due to an error from simply accelerating the vehicle. All that much more on The Topping Show. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in today. Today's episode of Topping Show is sponsored by Topping Technologies. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in IT security. Heck, I see their founder released twice a day. Gotta say he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, you see, that's the joke. If you're an IT there or a business owner, you can reach the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also trying to get to 4,000 subscribers, so if you can click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. Now going on to the business part of the podcast, you have jelly beans sold to Ferrara Candy Company. Now, interestingly enough, Ferrara they actually previously owned and based in Chicago. They're the maker of more than 20 brands, including Nerds, Sweet Tarts, Black Forest, and Trolley. So throughout these years, you wonder, where on earth do these gelatinous worms come from? And unfortunately, due to false advertising as a child, I almost believe they certainly grew in the ground. Well, quite the antithesis. They're actually mostly chemicals and factory made these days. They're not free reign for the organically inclined in the audience, so a little disappointing in that regard. Nevertheless, Ferrara said that the sale involves nearly 800 Jelly Belly workers in the facilities in California, Illinois, and Thailand, but they did not spell out any planned changes for that footprint when, as a spokesperson said, any details the company is able to publicly share are now at this time. So I can't help but think, if you just buy a giant company, and this company, for reasons, they have factories and facilities in California and Illinois. Yes, those are the antithesis for most businesses due to regulation, costs. Yeah, they're just so absorbent. I can't imagine trying to buy a house or rent anything over there. So, yeah, if I were a gambling man, if I was a new owner of that company, I would say short-term cost, it will be a pretty penny. Well, these days, pennies are usually worthless. They're 99.99% zinc. So perhaps a pretty vintage penny is more accurate since they were made of real copper back in the day. And I would say, well, a pretty vintage penny upfront cost, yes, it'll cost a lot of money to move the factories in the short term. However, the sales in the aggregate, or the savings in the aggregate, will be so overwhelming, we have to move these facilities to Texas, Florida. You know, some states are much more friendly and attractive for businesses. Also states that don't have income taxes. Employees tend to like that. It's a nice little benefit. So it'll be interesting to see if they choose to relocate those actual facilities. Now, in terms of fun company history of the Jelly Beans, they were founded in Illinois in 1869. And incredibly enough, they have still maintained to be in business in Illinois for that long, when many businesses have been leaving in droves. Boeing, one of the most iconic companies, left their Chicago office and headquarters months ago, as every company, again, is just struggling to make ends meet. And Chicago has a lot of issues, including more taxes you can possibly comprehend, and as well as a city that's as safe as, I can't think of a metaphor ridiculous enough to actually convey what I'm trying to say in terms of it's not safe at all. There's a reason it's precipitously downhill throughout the years. Although I'm sure they'll be good next year. Some of the Chicago Bears, they'll be good next year, I'm told. That's a sports balls joke because, yeah, they'll never be good again. At least my 3 cents. Now, interestingly enough, they were founded in 1869. They were actually founded and owned by the Rowland family for 6 generations. So, in terms of being a family company, that's something to greatly admire. Most businesses, as well as generational wealth, are usually destroyed to second and third generations, an overwhelming majority of the time. So to see something that still has a family connection, that's my 3 cents. That's pretty cool. I kind of, as a youth might say, that's groovy. I believe that's a common term. And the company said that jelly beans now come in 100 flavors, including a line of sports beans, and distributed in more than 60 countries, which, I mean, realistically, I can't imagine the last time I purchased a jelly bean since I'm an adult. Nevertheless, I remember as a child, they were quite popular because of the Harry Potter books. They had the Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, and of course, brilliant licensing. Jelly Belly actually did an agreement with J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, and they had those fun little novelty jelly beans with a weird oddity of flavors for quite some time. When was the last time you purchased them? I again, not in living memory. But nevertheless, I know it's a very popular candy. And when asked for additional comment, they said, quote, as we are considering the future of the Jelly Belly company, we have been steadfast in our commitment to create a win-win situation for our employees, our consumers, and our products. Unquote. This is from Harold Rowland Sr., the chairman of the board of directors of Jelly Belly, said in a statement, quote, quote, when I met with the Ferrara team, I recognized a like-minded group that shares our knowledge, our passion for the candy business, as a talent and resources to grow our products and the careers of our people around the world. I'm confident to the continued success of Jelly Belly as part of the Ferrara portfolio, unquote. So it'll be interesting to see, maybe perhaps, and again, in terms of successful acquisitions throughout the centuries, kind of few and far in between in terms of, when I say the success, I mean really maintaining the brand, the original brand, the integrity, the quality. Not all times, but many times they precipitously go down after an acquisition. Now, there have been a couple successful ventures throughout the years or partnerships throughout the years, but they're kind of few and far in between. Now, in this case, perhaps they'll just have a lot of savings because, again, all these candies have in common high fructose corn syrup. It's the crap that comes from out of the corn that, ironically, you can't even eat. If you were to go up to the corn stalk and try to eat it, you can't. It's engineered specifically for industry, like putting it into candy and making ethanol, ridiculously enough. So there are a lot of savings when you have all these brands under one roof. That means you can buy things in bulk even more. So even more high fructose corn syrup, maybe 3 natural flavors, and a whole myriad of chemicals. Now, when you're buying in bulk, there's a lot of savings, just like when you and I go to the Costco or the big box mart. The bigger stuff you buy in quantity, usually the lower price per unit. So that might be a great benefit to jelly beans, and hopefully they found some way for the family to continue to stay involved and ensure that they're still a part of the business. And it'll be interesting to see, but for now, it sounds like a little sad business news, but perhaps long term, it'll be great and we'll all be able to, well, I won't enjoy it, but I'm sure some children will be able to enjoy the joy that is Jelly Belly. Other interesting business news, you have Geico saying they'll lay off about 6% of their staff. Now, that equates, again, when you always look at business statistics, political statistics, any statistics in general, really, you always want to ask yourself, what's the sample size? What's the big picture? Because sure, 6%, well, if you have 100 employees, yeah, that's 6 people. But because of the huge size of Geico, relatively speaking, that equates to laying off about 2,000 employees. So that's quite unfortunate if you work there, and quite concerning in terms of, historically speaking, one of the most profitable businesses throughout time has been insurance companies. It's mostly educated gambling. They have their fancy algorithms, and they know when things will or not pay out, and they know what they need to do in order to make a profit. Now, historically speaking, they've been so profitable. You look at Geico, majority of their spend, you look at their 10K and look at all the business, it's mostly advertising. Because whether people like it or not, some people perceive insurance as a commodity. While I certainly don't, since I've had better experiences with some over others, there are a lot of people that kind of feel similar to high fructose corn syrup in a can, also known as soda pop, or soda, or pop, depending on where you live in the country. So in order to gain market share, traditionally they have to do a lot of advertising. Now, with Geico, it'll be interesting to see. Unfortunately, they do not specify what parts of the company in terms of those roles. It sounds as if it might be kind of a flat rate in terms of all departments affected equally. Good rule of life if you're just getting early in your career or if you're thinking about career. Sales, while you do have your ups and downs, traditionally those are the last people let go when it comes to layoffs because they're generating there's a very direct correlation to their performance and the performance of the business. So one of my mentors early on in my life always told me sales is a pretty safe bet in terms of job and career stability, as long as you can perform adequately or even better, accelerate your performance and perform even better than the rest. Now, nevertheless, in regards to the communications from the CEO, Todd Combs, he actually said that, and this was a company-wide email, which I actually do kind of, certain instances where emails just make sense because they're a time saver. It'll be interesting to see if there's any cultural backlash internally in terms of the company, if they would prefer a video call or an all-hands call, which if you work in corporate America, it's exactly what it sounds. Everyone, all hands on deck, everyone in the company gets on a giant conference call, and you listen to leaders and see what kind of ideas they have. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they'll ask for feedback, and they give you more insight to the company's current and future state. Now, in terms of this company-wide email, Todd Combs cited the need to the position to this is for regarding why they did layoff. He said the need was for, quote, long-term profitability and growth. And they additionally said that, and that's unquote, additionally said that the layoffs are due to a number of factors, including the inflation and rising medical costs. In addition to parts and labor shortages have extended their auto repair times, adding a, quote, very significant, very difficult period, unquote, is according to the CEO. So it'll be interesting. That's another thing when it comes to the good old-fashioned ripple effect. Kind of throw a stone in a pond. Well, I was going to say, depending on where you live, that may or may not be a conceivable thing. But if you do that, you'll see the ripples go throughout, the whole pond. And they get bigger and bigger. They start very big and they get really small, but it goes throughout the whole pond. So interestingly enough, a lot of these factors are people like, oh yeah, inflation, that's not... There's actually some people that maybe I should do... Let me know, would you appreciate me doing like a street interview where I go on the streets and ask crowds of people? There are people who legitimately don't think there's an inflation issue right now. They think the economy is great, including the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, which, yeah, she's the one who says, oh yeah, we can afford to give even billions and billions upon billions of dollars with no fiscal ramifications. Which, again, is akin to having a teenager 10 grand in credit card debt and asking dad to use the other credit card, and they go, oh yeah, this will fix the situation. I'll just buy more candy and popcorn and single-cycle unicycles. I assume that's what youth purchase these days. And CD players still in style, maybe, perhaps. But it'll be interesting. In terms of industry similarities, State Farm had a similar layoff where they allowed specifically about 11% of the workforce. That was a couple months ago in August. That correlated to about 2,400 employees. So again, another company where traditionally very profitable, pretty consistent in their growth rate. Now, let me know in the comments, do you think this is them just trimming the fat and using some political talk? Or is it legitimately because of these increased costs, the increased healthcare costs in the United States, as well as the increase of the parts getting hard to find? And that's only going to get worse if, unfortunately, you use something that's manufactured by Ford, GM, or Stellantis, also known as Chrysler. Well, I say that because they're still on strike. So part of the strike includes the parts department. So if you need a part to repair your vehicle, and statistically speaking, those need many repairs, well, you're going to have to sit and wait because they're very short-staffed. Now, I think in terms of the lesson learned in terms of those companies, the lessons learned should be cross-train your employees. So when there's inevitable strike, because there are always strikes for those companies, well, then you can adapt quicker and you don't have to worry about these affecting your customers. Now, nevertheless, going back to Geico, their automotive insurance, well, they do all insurance, but I think most people know them for automotive insurance. It'll be interesting to see, will this also increase their prices as well? And is this indicative of the economy going to get worse over time? Let me know in the comments. It'd be fascinating to hear what you have to say. Other interesting business news, you have Chevron going to buy Hess oil for $53 billion. Now, this is specifically $53 billion in an all-stock deal, and the company has announced this earlier this week, Monday. And with the purchase, importantly, the Chevron company will gain a foothold in Guyana, which is one of the world's major new oil producers. This is per Bloomberg. And they'll add resources also in the Gulf of Mexico, the Bakken Shale Formation, which also that formation reaches into Montana, North Dakota, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Saskatchewan. Say that 12 times in a row, and I might get it right once. Perhaps, but another time perhaps. Now, they also say that the deal is expected to close in the first half of 2024 because, again, when it comes to any acquisition, especially ones of these size, there's more paperwork than you can possibly fathom and more fact-checking and more. It is a huge ordeal, and there will be teams upon teams of people involved in this. And, of course, there's a not insignificant threat of the SEC shooting it down or the Securities Exchange Commission with antitrust lawsuits or antitrust concerns. Now, interestingly enough, this is just weeks after one of the largest competitors, ExxonMobil, announced that it would be purchasing Texas-based Pioneer Natural Resources for billions as well. So we're seeing all these consolidations in the oil industry, partially because, well, I think for many reasons. One of the issues is the U.S. has decreased the amount of permits that they've given out throughout the years. Well, that's politics 101, actually, because at the time is the people who voted during the last election, they wanted that. So you have less permits, so that's a benefit. They've increased them a little bit. Still, buying a competitor is much more, usually at a certain scale, it's much more easier than growing organically. So it'll be interesting to see as gas prices go up and up and up, how at the end of the day we're going to increase supply. Also, there's government entities that don't want there to be an increase in supply. So it'll be interesting to see what the future of energy is. I was going to say maybe someday people will realize how great nuclear is, considering that's one of the best ROIs out there when it comes to clean energy. And many would argue it's also 100% renewable, and it's also 100% green. Because, I mean, the byproduct is depleted uranium, which the military loves because it makes tank busters. Because it's one of the most dense substances on the planet is depleted uranium. Put it in the middle of a little tank round and bam, bust through another tank. So it'll be interesting to see. But as I always say, time shall tell. Now, going over to the culture part of the podcast, you have Bud Light bribe $150 million attempting to buy and keep shelf space, as well as keep the distributors happy after their sales precipitously continue to crash lower and lower and lower. Now, this is all thanks to the brilliant brainchild, Alyssa Heiderchild, who was very proud about being the very first woman executive for marketing at Anheuser-Busch InBev. She thought it was a brilliant idea. They're going to partner up with Dylan Mulvaney, an up-and-coming TikTok star who's best known for being a trans activist and having the YouTube or TikTok series, rather, in which Dylan was, again, biological male, dressing up in women's clothes and makeup and all the other accessories, in which Dylan proclaimed to have a day of womanhood all the way up to 365. And then to celebrate that 365th day, Anheuser-Busch InBev sent this person a can with their face on it, which, interestingly enough, that perhaps is the most valuable piece of marketing memorabilia in history because of the historical impact it had. Because I say that no company's ever messed up more, I believe, in history. In fiscal Q2, they lost $400 million in sales. Just gone compared to the same fiscal period last year. And every week, sales are down about 30% for Bud Light brand specifically by dollar amount. Per volume, it's usually 26 to 27% by volume. Now, they've had this issue, huge cultural backlash. And then you also have people, when Bud Light didn't quote-unquote stand with Dylan, well, then they alienated people on the far left who are standing for this trans activist. Oh, many people are also concerned, oh yeah, Dylan's average age in terms of who watches this individual on the TikTok is 15 years old. So for some odd reason, marketing alcohol towards that age group, many people didn't think that was a prudent business idea. Who would have thought? But nevertheless, everyone got pissed off, and even people in the mill were confused and annoyed, and they just don't want to have a lecture every time they try to enjoy a beer. Although you could also debate how many people truly enjoyed Bud Light prior to the incident. That perhaps requires some investigative journalism, though I almost dare not experience it firsthand because I would have to inebriate or drink a Bud Light, which, I mean, might kill me. You never know, the taste itself. But nevertheless, Anheuser-Busch has a big problem. They're losing sales week after week. Now, one of the biggest things that keep you in business when you're a big box company like that is shelf space. Some companies take decades to get on that shelf, especially at Walmart. That's some of the most valuable real estate on the planet, bar none. And because their sales has dropped so far, Walmart and 7-Eleven, those are the two major brands that they've been talking about in terms of losing their shelf space, are decreasing their shelf space considerably. Which, again, takes years to get that shelf space. And with beer, a lot of people buy it on a whim. They don't put it down on a list because, again, you don't need it, especially if it's Bud Light. Well, you could also argue no one needs Bud Light. But nevertheless, when it comes to like a grocery list that you write down, not a lot of people actually, I would argue, put that down as a necessity. They get by it as an impulse, similar to people who buy high fructose corn syrup at the checkout, or also known as candy bars. But it's one of those issues where if it's on the shelf and you see it, you'll buy it. So the more you see it, the more likely you are to buy it, perhaps. So that's why this is a big threat. The sales are already down. If they lose the shelf space, well, it just makes the situation that much worse. So Anheuser-Busch InBev is thinking, how can we maybe remediate the situation? We're going to spiff these companies or bribe them, whatever term you prefer. We're going to give a huge fiscal incentive for them not to take away our shelf space and not to stop distributing a product that no one is buying. Well, I should not be so bombastic. 30% of people are saying they will not buy. I don't know if there's an issue in the United States with taste buds where 70% of Americans don't have taste buds anymore. That perhaps is an issue we need to address in full with another investigation. But they still have 70% of their sales. So, I mean, relatively speaking, the glass is half full. Now, again, the glass is 70% full, but with Bud Light, so you could argue it's also worth, you'd rather have an empty glass to begin with. But nevertheless, now, this is thanks to the New York Post, and they're talking about $150 million in incentives, which, again, imagine being the number one beer for about 20 years. You didn't have to do anything. You just put out a country music commercial, sponsor a sports balls game, and then one marketing initiative just tanked your company overnight. That's the business brilliance of Alyssa Heiderchild and Dylan Mulvaney. You see, that was sarcasm. It was a business blunder of the century, bar none. Now, it looks like specifically they're actually putting these incentives to the distributors and the beer companies to keep the shelves stocked with their product, because these retailers are more and more reassigning the space towards the beer brands that actually are selling, such as Coors, Yangling, as well as, what was the best? Miller. which shows how much I actually consume beer. Personally, I usually prefer spirits when the occasion calls for it, but nevertheless, let's see here. In terms of the specifics, they're calling it a market share incentive. So the largest brewer told the distributors hit by the Bud Light fiasco that it's established a marketing recovery incentive program, also known as "We're paying you, please for the love of God, don't stop shipping our beer." And that program is beginning second half. Oh, it's going to be beginning the second half of 2024 through the end of next year. This is according to the memo from Anheuser-Busch Chief Commercial Officer Kyle Norrington, the trade publication reported, which, again, so much money they're trying to throw at this situation where they could have fixed this. You tell us that Heckler & Koch, or Koch, depending on how you pronounce it, is a very popular German arms manufacturer. They've been around forever, most well known for prolifically creating the MP5. Now, they had an issue where the social media gal decided to do a business blunder of the day, and they decided to talk about pronouns and culturally sensitive topics that alienate a certain part of your customer base, which I would say if you're talking about firearms, more often than not, they're conservative. And within 24 hours, HK addressed the post on Twitter and said, "Hey, we do not want to get into politics. That's not our brand." And they leaned into the meme brilliantly. I say that because they actually had a picture of the Jurassic Park dinosaur excrement, and there's a meme on it, and they said, "New HK social media manager coming into," which that was a funny meme to put out. They're addressing the situation. They're talking about how they messed up. And of all the companies to actually come back, or in terms of, I don't know if you want to call it unwelcomify the company, that's the most bizarre one, because if you look at HK, that company in particular, they get a majority of their revenue comes from government contracts. The civilian market for them, it's an aftermarket. It's basically sprinkles on the cake, metaphorically speaking. It's a very little part, which is why if you go to most stores in the United States for guns, they either have no HK display, and I say display like a show display with all the firearms that they create. They either have a very small show display, or no display at all. They don't carry the product. But again, that's a good example of, culturally speaking, and from a business perspective, how you could turn the situation around. Anheuser-Busch, it's almost as if they're trying everything to make the situation worse, or darn near. And it just, even with all this money, and again, let me know in the comments. It's one of those things where money doesn't fix all problems, especially when you made a mistake and you're not willing to admit it. I can it being perhaps a good metaphor for Bud Light. Is Bud Light the Jaden Smith of beers? That'd be interesting. That perhaps might be the most apt metaphor I've thought of. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that's the best metaphor thus far? Now, it'd be interesting to see. Let me know in the comments. Again, they're putting all these incentives. They're trying to basically buy time, because that's what they're doing. They're paying to keep it on the shelf because they think it will eventually sell. And again, they're still selling 70% of their beer, depending on what you really want to call it. They're also giving a lot of it away with the sweepstakes, another topic for another time. But they're trying to buy time to keep that shelf space because they desperately need it if they ever want to regain the volume of product and the sales of product. And again, this is for next 2024 second half. Will the situation be gone by then? A lot of analysts, a lot of people are saying these sales are gone, you're never going to get them back. Let me know in the comments, do you think, again, this isn't really addressing the issue, this is them just buying shelf space and trying to buy time, do you think there's enough time for that to actually happen? And then, is that enough? It'll be interesting to see, but as I would say, time shall tell. Other interesting cultural news, you have Maxim Magazine puts a biological man on the, quote, 100 hottest 100 women list, unquote. I think the biggest cultural surprise here is also magazines still exist, apparently, or Maxim still exists, even more unusual. Now, this is thanks to a report from the Daily Wire. Now, Maxim Magazine specifically named biological male and former Australian rules football player Daniel Laidley to its hottest 100 list in Australia for 2024. Now, you could perhaps argue for Australia, it's hot 100. That was a little joke there. All right, never left. Now, they actually put this person, the trans-identified man, landing at number 92 I, I don't normally get jealous, but man, it's a pretty impressive jawline. I'm not gonna lie. Even if I were to shave, you'd be sorely disappointed at my jawline. You see this person's jawline, you're like, that's a very masculine jawline. But nevertheless, it looks like Danielle. Nevertheless, Lately, who played and coached the Australian Football League, which is a joke in and of itself, the AFL, please. Now, they also joined actress Margaret Robbie on the hot list to name the hottest woman for the 4th time. Who the hell's a Margaret Robbie? What is a Margaret? Margaret Robbie. I don't know who this person is. Is it an actress? Oh, well, interesting. Now, the magazine released the list on Wednesday, and it was being blasted for honoring a biological male on the list of hot women, but also because 3 years ago, Ladley went by the first name of Dean, was arrested for stalking, which did the Daily Wire not understand the easiest way to get out of any crime is just to change? I mean, there's a reason Caitlyn Jenner never got arrested for killing that person in the automobile accident. That was before Caitlyn became Caitlyn. I was gonna say I need I always feel like I need the meme of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where I have a chart full of everything where Charlie's trying to figure out where the mail is going. Pun moderately intended with the mail part, but nevertheless, it looks like arrested for stalking. And in 2022, the Maxim honoree reportedly pleaded guilty to stalking after repeatedly making calls and sending text messages to a woman also sitting in a car outside her home, watching and taking pictures of her. And again, I should clarify, taking pictures of the other person. I know the grammar teachers must be in it, their heads must be rolling with the confusion. Well, I guess public school teachers really don't do much these days on average, since you have, math, science, history scores all-time low, ACT scores at 32-year low. Nevertheless, now, of course, actually, interestingly enough, there have been some backlash on the Twitter sphere, and we all know Twitter, well, it's called X, but I think we all call it Twitter. Now, this was actually posted on Twitter by End Wokeness, and this person said, quote, "This is Danny Ladley, a biological male, added Hot 100." And it got 5.5 million views in a couple days. And looks like, what's this person's name again? I gotta be courteous and use the right name. So the former dean, not of a school, but the name that was dean is now Danielle. Okay, so it is Danielle. It's a new name. Okay, so this is a video of Danielle. Okay. Interesting. So we'll play this video, and if you have suggestions for picture-in-picture production software, I appreciate it. I'm trying to find one that really is more intuitive and actually, works. I tried one where it just wouldn't show the other screen. So if you have suggestions, please put them in the comment below so you can make the show better. I took the feedback. I hear the comments that want it. So I'm trying to find the best way to do that in real production, not post-production with editing. So, and perhaps of all the things you don't want to see, I don't think you want to see this. It'll probably, I'm not saying it's 100% guarantee it'll burn your eyes out. I'm just saying it's not a 0% chance risk. But nevertheless, I will play the audio for you.
I was in the 1.8 percent of transgender people who hid it from the world. Be vulnerable. Find some people who you can trust, who you can talk to, and they'll support you. And invariably, everything will be okay.
I told my truth, which was, to help Dad out and tell.
Wait a minute. Won't this guy get canceled now? So this is Kane Ladley, who is Danielle's son. So I wonder if this person will get canceled. Although, yeah.
Tell her story the best way that I could.
I guess the son did use the preferred pronouns, so perhaps. Wait, so can you still use the word dad? Or does it? It's hard to keep track of all this. Again, a little not Venn diagram, but one of those conspiracy boards with all the nice little yarn and little pins. I think that'd be handy for some of these situations, because again, depending on how what that son says, if he would have a YouTube channel, it'd be, nuked. It'd be, get a strike, be censored immediately. Now, interestingly enough, what do you think of the comments? Do you think they'll be very approving and supportive of this nomination, or I guess it's an award for Maxim Magazine, or do you think it'll be pejorative? Let's dive in and find out. Let's see here. Whoa. It's not rocket science, which A+ for marketing because their picture is of a space rocket. This person says, quote, "Are there only 99 women left in the world? When did that actually happen?" Unquote. Got 4,939 likes. And interestingly enough, End Wokeness responded to that saying, "Rosie O'Donnell still wouldn't make the cut," unquote. They got 1,678 likes. Oh, it's the good old, not Hercules, but He-Man meme in which he says something interesting, then he goes away on his little moped thingamajig. Looks French. Nevertheless, this GIF, or meme more accurately, this meme says, "Trans women are just mansplaining what it's like to be a woman." And then He-Man turns around and goes away and says, "Until next time, friends." Got 631 likes. Let's see here. Meme that says, you've probably never been Woman of the Year, but these men have. And it's a picture of the famous weightlifter who changed genders to be a weightlifting championship, as well as other people who have received accolades and awards for changing gender. And that got 448 likes. Ooh, Austin Powers. A little bit of a retro gif, or meme. This person said, by the name of Maria Isabella, saying, quote, oh, I guess this is, in the meme. It says, "That's not a woman, it's a man baby." And it's Austin Powers saying it, so hilarious British voice insert there. I got 1,724 likes. Another hilarious photo complication of biological men dominating in sports as well as entertainment. And the GIF for the words say, "The patriarchy always wins," unquote. And that got 221 likes. So very well received. Another one has Miss Maria. Maria is very active. It's like 7? Oh my gosh. Maria Isabella has 7 memes in a row. Though they're all very well received. They're getting hundreds of thousands of likes. So one of them is of Clint Eastwood, the original OG, as the youth might call him, in his good old cowboy getup, and it says, quote, "A good kick in the balls will solve your gender confusion," unquote. I got 1,378 likes out of 21,000 views. Another one from Maria Isabella saying with a Dr. Seuss, not meme, but it's a Dr. Seuss Photoshop book. And the Dr. Seuss book says, quote, "If you're born with a private part, you are not a chick," unquote. And it got 1,860 likes. Now, I'm trying to find some responses that aren't Isabella. She's very popular. All right, we're finally, it's like a little scrolling again. Okay. She's going all out on these. All right. I was going to say, she's got thousands of likes. We're going to do some other ones. Prophecy 13 says, quote, "Being a bad-looking man and a woman at the same has got to be tough," unquote. Person got 1,018 likes. Let's see here. A lot of the GIFs, or the memes rather, of Jesus smoking a cigarette saying "flooded again," which I was going to say, that's a retro throwback to the youth. I was going to say, I know public schools don't teach Bibles anymore, or much for that matter. But nevertheless, that is a retro meme. Although, I don't think that meme was around at the time. A retro reference, nevertheless. Although some people might say some things don't get out of style, or something to that effect. Let's see here. Somebody named Jason Stafford saying, quote, "David Lee Roth looks great for his age," unquote. Getting 499 likes. Someone actually, again, Maria Isabella is on fire with her activity. She's very busy in this thread. Her response, another very liked one, is one in which you have Jabba the Hutt with a pink wig, eyeliner, or whatever you call the thing you put on top of the eye, and then blue lipstick. And the GIF, or not the GIF, the text on that says, "It's ma'am." I got 448 likes. Mr. Frosted Sleet saying, quote, no one takes this crap seriously, unquote, got 300 likes. Let's see here. Oh, you got some. Oh no, that's Maria again. I was going to say I thought I found a supportive, because I saw the flag, so I thought it was a supportive response, but not so much. Maria Isabella has a trans flag, and her text on the flag says, "Trans women are men," and then it got 192 likes. So I'm trying to find. Again, there's perhaps confirmation bias because this was tweeted by someone by the name of End Wokeness, so presumably the people following this are looking for that kind of content. Someone named Dr. Venture saying people need to help lens crafters, unquote, getting 111 likes. Oh, so I'm not the only one who saw this or observed this. You have someone named Bitnar saying, quote, he just said his dad was a her, unquote, and he got 86 likes. Let's see here. So again, this is one of the most... Whoa. Again, Maria Isabella is on fire. She's another one that got over 446 likes. This one has a picture complication, or a picture of two pictures, perhaps double the picture for your money, in which you have someone wearing blackface and it says, the meme or the text is offensive to African Americans. And then you have the picture supplanted right next to it of Dylan Mulvaney, who, I was going to say, if you're living under a rock, Dylan Mulvaney is a biological man who turned trans activist. And that said, the GIF or the text under Dylan says, not offensive to women, got 446 likes from Isabella. And John Johnson 3 says, quote, Maxim Magazine should declare bankruptcy and then vanish from the face of the earth. A man in the dress is a man in the dress, and he can't ever be a woman. And no matter what his fantasies, he'll still need a prostate exam when he turns 40, unquote. Got 347 likes. So needless to say, in terms of people agreeing with a Twitter post, this is perhaps the most absolute agreement with the original statement I've ever seen. And it'll be interesting, again, this is Australia. It'll be interesting to see, culturally speaking, does the pendulum continue to swing the same way in the United States in terms of the cultural acceptance of the biological men or the trans men winning these types of awards and accolades? Or will the pendulum swing back to the middle? Where do you think, culturally speaking, the United States' future is in the next 12, 24, 36 months as businesses and people continue to research and see these types of things come to the forefront, when it is exponentially increasing in frequency? You're seeing it and reading it and knowing about it more and more. It'll be interesting to see how society takes it or evolves or devolves. It'll be interesting to see how it goes from here. Let me know in the comments. Do you think, in terms of these awards and accolades, will they increase, decrease, or vanish off the face of the earth? It'll be interesting to see, but as I always say, time shall tell. Now, going over to the political part of the podcast, you have United Auto Workers expanding their strike against the good old Big Three, striking against Chrysler Stellantis. They're now having 6,800 workers walk off the Ram trunk assembly plant, which, again, the importance of trucks is paramount for the automotive industry. When I say the importance of trucks, I mean internal combustion engine trucks, the ones that are, profitable. The other ones are losing money. For now, again, in the aggregate, over a long-term time, the companies will, in theory, become profitable like Tesla did back in the day with their sedans. Now, with Chrysler, they actually went bankrupt so bad in 2009, in part because of the UAW contracts. Well, they actually bought out by a European company by the name of Fiat, and the new corporate company that owns more brands than you can count is now called Stellantis. So they own Chrysler, which owns Dodge as well as Jeep, which, if you're an American, those are probably the most popular brands. Now, I'm not saying Dodge deserves to go bankrupt again, but they did kill the manual transmission for the truck in 2019. Disgusting. Every vehicle, by default, should have 3 pedals. And in fact, I would actually have a mandate saying they should all have 3 pedals so everyone could learn how to drive properly. You enjoy the experience. You can't desk drive or eat your Big Mac or, 7 extra large soda pop from the 7-Eleven to give you, statistically give you a high frequency of potential of getting diabetes. I should clarify, I don't want to get sued, although that'd be a hilarious lawsuit by 7-Eleven. I don't blame them for their high fructose corn syrup, remember. But nevertheless, I kind of admire Dodge. They had a great vehicle, especially, well, thanks to the third-party Cummins engine, good old diesel engine, before the government bastardized it with all these mandates to make them unreliable and basically make them disposable. I don't put too much blame on Ram for having to acquiesce to government because the government does have the biggest guns against them. And I do admire them for having this. They were the last truck, I'd say truck, the big truck is the Ram 2500. They were the last truck you can get with 3 pedals, manual transmission, the most fun you could ever have. And now, the only truck you can get in the United States, the Jeep Gladiator, is not a truck. Doesn't count, I'm sorry. The last truck you can get in the United States, or the stick shift, also known as 3 pedals, the best vehicle on the planet, is now the Toyota Tacoma, which is a light-duty truck. You can't do a lot of towing on it. So unfortunately, I don't want to say they're canceled, but Dodge, Ram, sort of disappointed. Now, in terms of the importance of what keeps the company's lights on, well, it quite literally is the most important part of an automotive company is the trucks. They lose money on most cars, especially compact cars and cars that are built to a price point, entry-level vehicles. They lose money on those things left and right. The trucks are where they actually make a profit. So to have them be kneecapped at this particular plant is going to be detrimental to Stellantis. Now, it looks like specifically it's going to have this is also Stellantis' largest walkout as well. So they're hitting up the most profitable and important plant and having them all walk out. Now, the walkout at the Sterling Heights assembly plant in a suburb of Detroit produces, the most popular truck, the Ram pickup truck. Now that brings the total number of UAW members on strike to about 40,000 members, which I'm not saying it's an easy job to just sit all day with a picket sign, but they're making $500 per week, which again, I think about how hard I've worked throughout my life and how little I got paid relative to $500 per week. I can't fathom getting $500 a week to strike. Now, interestingly enough, what is that, 40,000 members or 40,000 people who are currently striking. And remember, they have a war fund or a chest about $820 million to $850 million in the bank. So they can sustain the strike for a long time. That's why I don't think the strike is going to end anytime soon. I might be wrong. They have negotiations going around literally every minute of the day, seemingly, with proposals going back and forth between the big three and the United Auto Workers. But as of right now, that means every week they're paying their members about $20 million per week because they're paying all the people who are striking. Now, granted, if you're a member of the UAW, that's awesome because, again, for a lot of time, you're just paying your dues to have the UAW elect politicians who ironically destroy your industry with further rules and regulations, and of course also moving you to push you to make EV vehicles, which would mean less of your jobs. The irony is hilarious to say the least. Oh, and also those are the same politicians who cause inflation. Don't get me wrong, both sides cause inflation, but yeah, the past 2 years, the amount of money the government has printed is ridiculous. So that's $20 million per week they're currently spending, and they will be spending after these folks walk off the assembly line. So it's still plenty of lead time they can stay out. Now, the union, of course, put out a statement accusing Stellantis of, quote, the worst proposal on the table, unquote, for wage progression, cost of living adjustments, and other issues. This was according to Shawn Fain, the president, when he's putting out a message to the pickup line. Now, interestingly enough, they called the worst proposal on the table. Yeah, well, they're also not the biggest in terms of the big three. And I was going to say they also went bankrupt the worst. They went bankrupt so bad a European company bought them out. They're no longer, depending on how you define an American company. I mean, Stellantis is now foreign. Their headquarters, Stellantis, the big parent, is headquartered overseas. So they have a lot less to offer. It'll be interesting to see a wise old saying I remember from an old-timey movie. A good rule of thumb is if the movie's in black and white, it's probably worth watching. Once they start to color, get to the generation where they start to have color films, you probably have to check out some reviews because usually the quality can't help but think they precipitously declined. But it'll be interesting to see. In the old movies, I remember the gangster, Key Largo is a brilliant movie with Humphrey Bogart, one of the original OGs, as youth might call him. He says to the main protagonist who plays the gangster from Chicago, Al Capone, well, I should say the main gangster from Chicago. There's never going to be a loss or less gangsters in volume in the city to this day. But nevertheless, he said at the pinnacle of the movie, he says, one day you're going to have to teach me how to squeeze blood from a rock. Which I can't help but think, again, this is a pivotal time for these automotive companies. They can only give up so much before they go bankrupt, or they can't have the money to invest in the EV programs that, ironically, the UAW wants them to make. So, again, this is one of the most important factories the company has. Granted, let me know in the comments, are you going to buy a vehicle this week? Probably not. Personally, I buy Japanese so they'll last 20, 50 years. and a million miles. But I also try to make my, stretch the dollar as long as possible. With the economic uncertainty, I don't think there's a lot of people purchasing vehicles right now. And again, I appreciate the feedback in the comments. I am trying to work on decreasing the rate at which I speak. I know naturally I speak way too fast, and, copious amounts of coffee probably doesn't help the situation. But nevertheless, usually work about 105 hours a week, and coffee does help. So let me know in the comments what other feedback that would make the show better, and I do understand that's something I am trying to actively work on. So let me know in the comments, do you think, with the trucks in particular, what is Stellantis going to do? Are they going to shut down the plant completely? Is it to the point at which for this particular plant, those particular employees walking off will result in the lack of ability to complete the vehicle, similar to how Ford had to shut down the Bronco plant after the UAW did a partial strike where they actually had part of the assembly line come off the plant, but got to the point where they actually couldn't finish the vehicle. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to that particular use case. But as I always say, time shall tell. Other interesting political news, you have United Auto Workers live stream of President Shawn Fain on October 20th, but without censorship and with my charming personality. Now, I say that because, as usual, the comment section on these videos are, of course, by default, disabled. And while I might not agree with everything in the comment section, or many people in general, I'm an old soul in terms of I might not agree with everything you're saying, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Partially because I'm an American, that's what Americans should believe, and that's what we were founded on. So, again, we may not agree on many of the issues, and truth be told, I had a great conversation with someone who had a disagreement in terms of the philosophy of how a society should support single mothers and the babies, and we had a good back and forth, and while I didn't agree with this person's methodology, and I explained my position, we both wanted to address the situation and assist with the proper situation. We just had different methodologies on how to get there. And we were pretty calm and collected. We didn't have a angry back and forth. And lo and behold, I found it a fascinating topic and we were able to have a good back and forth. So if you disagree with what I'm saying about this coverage, let me know. And if you're someone at the UAW, if you're someone working the front lines, I'd be fascinated to hear your perspective. Do you love Shawn Fain? I mean, he got voted in. I mean, a lot of people wanted to strike in general. And if you're part of the big three and perhaps you want to remain anonymous for security reasons, let me know. Do you agree with the UAW? Or do you think it'll bankrupt the company? Again, more conversation, the better. And as a wise man once said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I always think the best, in terms of what ideas come to the top, I think the best cordial exchange of ideas and perhaps a debate is the best thing to go forward. And lastly, before I start the video, if you have suggestions on picture-in-picture production software, I appreciate the feedback if you have any suggestions. I say this because I know there are many ways to do it post-production, but with the current resource allocation I have now and my time constraints, I really need something that can do picture-in-picture during production. I did try a brand by the name of XSplit, but my camera, which is a USB Hyper, was a Razer Hyken 4K. It wouldn't recognize the camera even after I updated the drivers. So if you have suggestions, I would appreciate it because I do want to make the show better for everyone. And as cliche as it sounds, together we can make it better. So without further ado, I will go ahead and I will start the video. In terms of, I don't want to say slacking, but a wise man once said, every man should always suit up for every important occasion in your life. Well, personally, I also do it from just grocery shopping, since optimally for time, best to do it from coming back from a meeting. But nevertheless, Shawn has acquiesced from a suit. Last week he was in a sweater, which he got from a gift from a European Union that came to visit. Now he's in a sweater. I'm not saying it's pathetic, but yeah. Although, to his credit in terms of marketing, it does have a UAW embroidered on. So that, I'm not saying silkscreen isn't the best, but I'm saying embroidery is pretty fancy. That's pretty Cadillac, as the youth might say. That's a joke because the youth don't buy Cadillacs. Well, many people don't. Although the CTS4 with the stick shift, twin turbo V6 with the stick, that's brilliant Detroit engineering. I wish they would do more of it, but again, GM wants Cadillac to be full EV by 2030. GM all to be EV by 2035. It'll be interesting to see if that works out. But nevertheless, UAW Shawn Fain.
Good afternoon, UAW family. Today we're going to take a closer look at where things stand in bargaining with the Big Three. In the past 24 hours, we've got new offers from 2 of the 3 companies. So despite all the bluster about how much the companies have stretched, there's clearly still room to move.
Squeeze blood from that rock. Johnny Rocco, I think that was the old movie. Key Largo, brilliant film with Humphrey Bogart. I knew I'd remember it. I get there eventually. But nevertheless, back to the video.
But there's also a lot going on across our union, not just in the big three. This week, nearly 1,000 UAW members walked out on strike at 3 casinos here in Detroit as part of the Detroit Casino Council. During the pandemic, these workers barely got a raise. So
Yes, most companies also almost went out of business. Many did actually go out of business. And actually, during the peak pandemic, no one was buying vehicles. Ironically enough, when the pandemic first started, that was the best time to buy a vehicle. You can buy it they're giving out huge incentives. I guess maybe he's talking about the end when the supply chain and everything got messed up with the semiconductor lack of production, and then they started to increase. Which, again, if you look at the profits, the dealerships made the most profits with the markups, which are separate business entities. There's no benefits to the main companies that produce the product, such as GM, Ford, and Stellantis. But nevertheless,
they've launched the first ever wall-to-wall casino strike. Yesterday, we joined those members, along with Blue Cross Blue Shield UAW members on strike and Big Three UAW members on strike. Secretary Treasurer Margaret Mock and Vice President Mike Booth told the crowd that this isn't just about one industry or one workplace. It's about the whole working class finally standing up to corporate greed. Sunday night, the master contract will expire covering 1,100 workers at General Dynamics in Region 1, Region 2B, and Region 9. At a time when there's endless money for war, somehow there's still no money for the working class.
An interesting political topic. I wonder if he'll lean into that interesting idea. Now, fun business fact of the day, back in the World War II, all these companies actually supported the war effort because partially we didn't have a specific defense industry for the most part in the United States. GM actually made everything from tanks to machine guns. IBM prolifically made the M1 carbine, as well as doing, well, maybe I would say the most morally vacuous manufacturer and maintenance of devices in history. Don't look up IBM in World War II. I'll just say that much. So it'll be interesting to see. That is a very politically hot topic in the United States, is defense budget. Although in terms of ROI, and well, you could also defend the defense of the United States and why we haven't invaded. In terms of, there are many very beneficial things in terms of geography. I was gonna say the borders are a joke in the United States, for the most part, but a lot of people attribute our defense industry for that reason as well. Because again, if you look at the world, the United States has the most advanced tech, bar none, when it comes to the defense industry. There's a reason the largest defense contractors on the planet, they're all headquartered here. Think about it. You have Boeing, which was the original, the OG in terms of aerospace and manufacturing. Funny, many people think they're commercial today in terms of commercial manufacturing for the planes we fly on for work and fun, but they were best well known back in the day for war manufacturing and military vehicles. So you have Boeing, they're headquartered in the United States. You have Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor in the world, most prolifically known for making the F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced jet fighter in history. You also have Northrop Grumman. You also have Raytheon, which combined with, I believe, Collins Aerospace, they're most well known for the Patriot II missile, as well as the Tony Stark, the Raytheon Sarcos II exoskeleton, which disappeared. I can't help but think they're secretly still working on that. And then they also remained, if you play Call of Duty, the Javelin, which is a very famous missile, which is shoulder fired and it looks like it's going to hit the ground and it goes up. All the research and development, the headquarters for all these huge defense companies are all headquartered here for a very strategic reason. So, many fun business facts of the day. Let me know if you think it's too much ADHD or if you do or do not appreciate the somewhat correlated tangents I go on.
Shamefully, General Dynamics won't even agree to make Veterans Day a paid holiday, despite 25% of their workforce being military veterans.
That is not good, politically speaking. I almost laughed because that is certainly a business blunder. When you look at the defense industry, they overwhelmingly hire veterans. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. It makes logical sense. It's a great morale booster. The fact they don't have Veterans Day off, again, you ask me how many holidays we should have off, basically zero. I work 105 hours a week. I'm very selective of what holidays I think should actually exist. Now, Veterans Day, that's one of perhaps 5 or 6 holidays I think should continue to exist if and when I become president or whatever. So the fact that's not a paid holiday, that's pretty bad. I suspect the way he's phrasing it, it's not a paid holiday. I suspect it's a holiday, but perhaps it's not paid. I need to dig deeper, because that, on its face value, makes no sense for a defense company not to have that day off, especially as he says, given the demographic. So interestingly enough, people think I have a disdain towards Shawn Fain, or I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with most of what he says, but in this case, as cliche as it sounds, there's a little common ground. I think that should be a paid holiday off if, again, you're a defense contractor and General Dynamics doesn't have that for them. And that's just, in terms of just PR alone, that's a terrible business blunder. Let me know in the comments if you think, for that particular case, should that be a day off or not? I guess the only exception might be wartime, which, again, you can also argue when is the United States is or is not at war, and you need the production of the support material, the trainings, and the infrastructure to support the troops, which, again, that's a defense company. So, a little nuance there.
Last weekend, I went out to Pennsylvania and Maryland to meet with our nearly 4,000 members on strike at Mack Trucks. After voting down a tentative agreement by 73%, the members are ready to fight for more, and we've got their back 100%. Region 8 Director Tim Smith, Region 9 Director Dan Vicente, and myself went out there for strategy meetings with the membership and bargaining committees to talk about how we can do things differently, fight harder, and win bigger. The bargaining team met with Mack this week, and the company basically said they just wanted to rearrange the deck chairs and try to get a revote. But the members have already spoken. The council said no, and we expect Mack to come back with something real and quick. At ZF in Alabama, members recently voted to ratify a new agreement that will close the wage tier and grant more time off the job. These members stood strong on strike for a month and have a new contract to show for it. And just about an hour ago, our members at Fombert in Newton, Iowa have secured a tentative agreement. They've held the line since August 1st and will vote tomorrow on this deal. Congratulations to those workers on this important milestone. Meanwhile, we're still standing strong with our Region 9 members at Dometic and West Rock, who have been fighting like hell for a fair deal. Just this week, Local 1391 members at CVR Nitrogen, a fertilizer plant in East Dubuque, Illinois, voted 88-2 to reject the employer's latest offer and walked out on strike. The employer recently decided to mess with the workers' 401k, and our members in Region 4 aren't going to take that lying down. They stood up and joined the picket lines on Wednesday afternoon. At the Big Three, we're now well over a month into our stand-up strike. Our members on the line, especially those at our first stand-up targets at Local 900, Local 12, and Local 2250, have been out in the rain, in the cold, living off strike pay, wondering about the future.
Which, again, I can't help but think strike pay. What's that? Again, this isn't going to go on for a year. I wouldn't think that. But what if you got paid strike pay for a year? And I know public schools, I partially blame the teachers' unions. They're at all-time low for, well, everything in terms of testing, history, science, math. The ACT scores at a 32-year low. And yet the teachers' unions say they deserve more money every year. Nevertheless, we'll do a little fun education here today to make up for their ineptitudes. Now, they're making $500 per week. Now, there are 52 weeks in a year. So, if you multiply those two numbers, 52 weeks times $500 per week, means in the year they make $26,000 to strike. Which, I was going to say, earlier in my career, I didn't make that much money when I was working full-time. Yeah, alone when I was chilling with the picket sign. So $26,000 per year, which also means you wouldn't pay taxes, I don't believe, based on the U.S. tax code. Another topic for another time. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying if you click the subscribe button, it'll ensure that I never stutter again. But it may be the cure. It might be. We don't know. Cannot hurt to try. But nevertheless, $26,000 a year. That's a Not a pretty penny, because again, pennies are 99.99% zinc. So we'll say a vintage pretty penny.
I want to acknowledge the incredible courage and fortitude of these members and all of those holding the line.
Courage? Really? Come on. I mean, the United States, that word has become so diluted. Does it really mean anything anymore? Like, nevertheless.
Ability to hold out, to hit the companies economically, and to withhold our labor. This is our leverage, and this is our path to victory. We have one tool, and that's solidarity. Everything we do, our picket lines, our rallies, our videos, and these Facebook Live remarks is in the service of building our solidarity and using it to win at the bargaining table. Let me tell you what the company's path to victory is.
Interestingly enough, although they don't believe in free speech in terms of having the comments open or the like button, I mean, YouTube, the company censored the dislike button because they were scared of, public knowledge of how bad some videos are. It is ridiculous. They say it was to protect children's feelings, which, again, it's BS. If you go into the YouTube studio, the back end where you upload the videos, they'll still tell you the ratio. But nevertheless, the comments, they actually had a live stream, and the comments here are saying they're about half agreeing with Shawn, but a lot of the comments are imploring him to extremely escalate the strike, so increase the number of workers who are actually walking off. So interestingly enough, from a political perspective, again, moving on the political chessboard, could Shawn lose favor after a certain amount of weeks? Because either he's not being radical enough or he's not pushing enough, so to say, in terms of increasing the strike against the big three, or if they think he's conceding or giving a consent. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, a lot of people in the comments are actually wanting him to ramp it up, which makes sense. That one of the reasons they voted for him is because that was what he kind of campaigned on. He was known for being, I don't want to say creating conflict like a divorce lawyer, but yeah, creating conflict to prove the value and, to strike. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt, and division. Everything they do is in the service of fragmenting our membership.
Well, what about everything they do is also for the shareholders and the customers? That's when you look at GM, when you look at all these companies, the ripple effect and balancing everything, you can't only think about the workers. Like, in terms of, if you were to give the UAW what they originally asked for, again, that was valued between $80 and $100 billion. That would bankrupt Ford. That would bankrupt Stellantis again. And GM, depending on what year their profits are, it would have broke them even, or they would have gone into the negative. And again, with GM, they still have long-term debt of billions upon billions of dollars. We're talking, I believe, $91 billion is the last article I saw of that, which, again, eventually they need to pay off. Although, perhaps like the U.S. government, they'll just kick the can down the road forever. So, again, it'll be interesting to see, because, again, from a CEO perspective, they have to try to make everyone happy, or realistically, try to make sure everyone is as acceptable as possible. Because, again, they have shareholders to think about who are investing in these companies, people who are dependent on the dividends they pay out. There are a lot of variables in this equation. I can't imagine the accountant or the team, more accurately, probably, who's looking at every single one of these proposals and looking at the fiscal impact it will have across all these plants, across all of these shareholders. So if anything, I'm actually surprised both sides, the UAW and the big three, they don't negotiate these contracts out almost, I don't know, like years out. Like, again, there's such a long contract.
They want you to think, what if they really do close a plant?
Well, yeah, so that they've done that for decades. Sometimes they have to. Every business, or most businesses, have to, both because of profits and some because of consumer preferences. Sometimes you have to do that. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but sometimes it's reality of business, and sometimes, depending on the cost and the quality of the plant, it just makes sense to tear it down or shut it down and make a new one, maybe dedicated to a new product. And depending on the configuration of the plant and everything, it may or may not make sense. But nevertheless, I'll partially digress.
That's fear. They want you to think, do I really know where this is headed? That's uncertainty. They hope you're wondering, Does my union leadership really have my best interest at heart? And that's the doubt. Every time these company executives open their mouth, it is to increase the fear, increase the uncertainty, and increase the doubt among the membership.
I'm not going to say you'd be a good salesman, but some people pejoratively talk about sales representatives and their job. And some, I believe, I don't do this and I don't approve of this methodology, but many of them will use that methodology of the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and the doubt. What if you don't buy this product? What's the consequences if, how much is it going to cost your company if you don't initiate this new practice, if you don't buy this new widget, if you don't implement this new rule, or you don't get this new contract? So interestingly enough, I don't know if it's let me know in the comments. I do think it's more of I don't appreciate that approach. It's not my approach with my business. But it is interesting that he's bringing up this very common business practice. I think most Americans do not approve of the sales methodology. I think many people find it distasteful, which is why he's bringing it up. So from a political perspective, I think it's wise of him to bring up this methodology and bring it to kind of enlighten the methodology in which he sees them or he perceives them doing.
They win when we lose our sense of purpose, when we lose our sense of unity. And I've heard some members asking, when will we vote on this? Some members think maybe we've gotten as far as we can get and it's time to settle. I want to be clear. The membership is the highest authority in our union. You will always have the final say.
Their membership is down year over year, so that perhaps isn't the best thing to bring up.
Everything we do is in service of building the strength of our membership and building a better future for UAW members and the entire working class. But when we vote, it will be from a place of strength. You don't make decisions on your future out of fear, uncertainty, or doubt. That's a recipe for disaster. That's what we've done for decades in this union. For years, we've been playing defense at every step, and we've been going backwards. When we vote on a tentative agreement, it will be because your leadership and your council thinks we've gotten absolutely every dollar we can. We've looked at the company's proposals. We've costed their offer. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of the vice presidents, and in the opinion of your national negotiators, there is more to be won. One thing we've been hearing over and over from these companies is how they've offered us record contracts. They stole that line from us, by the way, and you know what? We agree.
Is that really something like a record? Who first used that term? Use the term record contracts. That's disappointing. The Brave search is pretty much, when I look up, well, that makes sense. Who first used the term record contracts? It's all about contracts for the record industry. Which, if you're a youth, or I was going to say, records used to be these things you used to use to play music. The record industry was a thing that helped facilitate bands and music and recording studios to come together. They used to use a thing called vinyl, and you have a needle on the vinyl. But I know I'm an old soul. I will digress back into the actual content.
These are already record contracts, but they come at the end of decades of record decline.
Yeah, also, isn't the market share declining? I mean, these companies, the big three made Detroit back in the day. Detroit used to be the richest city on the planet, a cultural phenomenon. I mean, they were the big three. You had GM, Chrysler, Ford, and then competition reared its head. And for better or worse, they didn't adapt properly. They lost market share. There's a reason why Honda, Toyota, they grow exponentially. Even Kia and Hyundai, in terms of their quality, they've come a long way. Heck, in the past 10 years, that company's grown astronomically into making an impressive product, albeit not enough stick shifts if you ask me. But, yeah, the big three, they're becoming less of the big three. In part, I think a mixture of many things, it's not a very single variable analysis of the situation, But a couple of things being the cost of labor already being higher than the competition, and the quality of the vehicles going down on average. I mean, it's not what they used to be. And my family, many of them came from Michigan. I mean, the stories out here were astronomical how good things used to be. But again, that's also because they had a majority market share too. They were huge. So, I mean, again, my 3 cents for the moment, you should be 2 cents, but 40-year hyperinflation, should charge 4 cents if I'm a generous man. Though still free to click the subscribe button. It's one of those things where times are just changing. So it'll be interesting to see. But nevertheless, what does Shawn continue to say?
So it's not enough to be the best ever when auto workers have gone backwards over the last 2 decades. That's a very low bar. I also find it a pathetic irony that every time they make an offer, it's the best they can do. It's a record offer. And then 2 days later, there's a new record.
I agree. They should have been steadfast in their very first offer. Again, depending on what negotiation tactic you prefer, I personally find it a waste of time to get back and forth for weeks over a stupid price point. I like to be pretty straightforward and transparent when it comes to my business. I say, here, this is the quality service we provide. This is the best price for this value. I mean, life's too short. I'm transparent. There's a certain price point we need to be at to either actually stay fruitful as a business so we can actually grow and reinvest into ourselves. I mean, so in terms of Shawn Fain, I actually agree on this point. GM and Ford and Chrysler this year just came out with their best offer. Again, given the politics of this situation, I don't think they would have worked anyway. Because again, Shawn Fain, he polled the members of the UAW. They wanted to strike. So I guess I'm not surprised they keep coming back to the table. But yeah, from a negotiation standpoint, kind of makes it look weak. Let me know in the comments if you think different, in terms of negotiation tactic would have worked in this case. But again, I think at a certain point, actually hilariously similar to the situation when you go to a car dealership, you have to just be willing to walk away if the deal doesn't make sense. And right now, depending on the finances, the numbers are changing on an hourly basis with all these different proposals going back and forth. You just have to say we can't do it. So it'll be interesting to see what the final offer ends up being. But Shawn has a point here in terms of it's not making the big three look good when every week or every 2 weeks they just give a little bit more. I mean, it's making Shawn look great. I mean, the optics are good for his party. The members are seeing Shawn get more and more every time he goes up to bat for them. So, I mean, it's almost as if they're actively helping this guy.
What that should tell you is there's room to move. This week, while we were literally at the bargaining table, GM released a video. And in that video, a millionaire GM executive asked our members directly, with all that on the table, why are we on strike? Meanwhile, the next day, the wage increase goes up, the progression goes down, and the retirement money goes up. That's why we're on strike. Because these extremely profitable companies have more to give. Last week, we took out the biggest auto plant in the country. The brave members at Ford's Kentucky truck plant joined the stand-up strike on a moment's notice and delivered a serious message and a serious economic blow to Ford Motor Company.
I'm not saying they should move that plant, but move that plant. I mean, again, I talked about it earlier in the show. If you're watching the whole show today, we talked about how the UAW just walked off from Chrysler, Dodge, Ram's Ford pickup production line. They watched about 6,800 workers walked off that site. Trucks are the bread and butter of Ford Motor Company. The internal combustion engine trucks is where they make a majority of their profit to fuel their EV fleet, which is, again, they're trying to get profitable. They're losing money now. The only reason they're in business is because of the internal combustion engine and that profit from it. So it is a big blow to kneecap them at that plant, because again, that's the lifeblood of the company. And again, politically speaking, they know that.
As we said last week, it wasn't just Ford who was going to get the message. It was Stellantis and General Motors as well. I'm happy to report that in the past 24 hours, we've seen serious movement from both Stellantis and GM. Meanwhile, Ford continues to stew about KTP and pretend they can't afford what we're asking for. On Monday, Bill Ford went to the Rouge to talk the same old talk about needing to stay sustainable and competitive. He said if the workers get our share of economic justice, he'd have to close plants like the Rouge. We took those comments seriously. For all their talk about wanting to invest in American jobs, they have the audacity to come to the Rouge and imply they might close it down while they make billions in profits off the products our members build there.
It's almost, I swear, I don't know if he's never read a business book. Now, granted, he's appealing towards his audience. I understand that. But, I mean, these companies reinvest their money, and they actually have shareholders to reward and actually incentivize to keep to actually not sell their stock as well, because they pay dividends as well. So, it's almost like a bad relationship. Like, it's not all about you. But, nevertheless, we'll continue to him.
It's never going to be enough for these people. We've taken cutbacks.
He's not looking in a mirror. I was sworn he was for a second there, but no, he was not.
After cutback, done give back after give back over the past 20 years. And what do we have to show for it? 65 plants closed in 20 years. Real wages down 30% over 20 years.
Is he going to tell us how many of those plants relocated?
Jobs killed and standards gone.
No, I guess he's not. Again, sometimes plants are sold because they don't produce a product the product doesn't need it anymore. And in some cases, you can't, depending on what you're building, what you're manufacturing, it's not really advantageous to try to retool a plant. I'm not saying every situation, but certainly sometimes that is the case. So we look at the Chevy Cruze, which I thought was actually a good little vehicle. Granted, it's because the engine and the transmission was built. The transmission came from Austria, interestingly enough. If you bought the correct Chevy Cruze, the one with the manual transmission like everyone should have had by default. But nevertheless, if you look at that vehicle, one of the reasons GM sold the Lordstown plant to it would become famously owned by Lordstown EV, which would go bankrupt. But the reason GM was selling it is because the consumer demand for the product was fleeting year over year, so it was decreasing in sales every year, and it just didn't make sense to keep the plant open anymore. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Bill Ford said it shouldn't be Ford versus the UAW. He said it should be the UAW and Ford against foreign automakers. I want to be crystal clear on one thing. The days of the UAW and Ford being a team to fight other companies are over.
Again, the divorce attorney. Always create conflict.
We won't be used in this phony competition. We will always and forever be on the side of working people everywhere.
The competition that's literally eating your lunch.
Non-union auto workers are not the enemy. Those are our future union family.
No, they aren't. I say that because most of those employees, they actually like the ability to negotiate their own contracts, to argue that, hey, I'm better than Bob at this assembly, I should be paid more by my individual merit. And in terms of Tesla, no one would ever want to join a union because Tesla employees, in terms of the assembly line workers, they get stock options. So what would you rather have? A flat rate fee that all your colleagues get paid the same amount regardless of performance, or Tesla stock? Which again, historically speaking, that stuff is, I guess it'd be, I was about to say it's worth more than its weight in gold, but stock is, actually don't even print stock certificates, and stock certificates, historically speaking, are just a piece of paper. So perhaps not the best metaphor, but they're worth a darn good amount. So what would you rather have, Tesla stock or to be part of a union working for Tesla? I'm pretty sure I'd take the stock, but I personally work like hell. I like to invest in myself in the upside, but that's just me.
Since the stand-up strike began, we've had thousands of non-union auto workers reaching out, wanting to join our movement. So no, we're not going to partner with Ford in a race to the bottom. And we're not going to partner with the big three to match the low standards of the non-union automakers. Instead, we're going to organize non-union auto workers everywhere. Together, we're going to stand up and take on corporate greed.
together we can continue to destroy American manufacturing. Is that I'm a little earwax perhaps? Is that what he said? Don't forget the largest automotive company, or one of the largest automotive company that's growing, is BYD in China. They're going to become one of the largest EV manufacturers on the planet, and ironically speaking, the governments these people elected are pushing EV mandates. Those imports are going to be coming sooner than we think, I believe.
Right now, we're striking the big three like we've never struck before. Next, we're going to organize non-union auto companies like we've never organized before. And together, auto workers are going to fight to make sure that auto jobs everywhere are good jobs. Jobs that can sustain a family. Jobs that allow everyone to retire with dignity. Jobs that are essential to the green economy without sacrificing our union standards. So billionaire Bill Ford made his own speech this week, talking down to us and telling us what we should be willing to accept. Literally, the next day, the company made an astounding announcement. Ford Motor E Company said they were going to give an additional $600 million in shareholder dividends this year.
Excellent.
That amount of money alone would amount to about $1 an hour raise for all Ford workers for the entire life of this next contract.
Are those Ford workers buying shares of Ford to be more invested in the company? Again, dividends help grow companies because they incentivize people to buy and hold stock, keeping the price up and increasing the price. So again, if you want to use the emotional rhetoric, I can play that game too. Well, the grandma down the street, she invested her whole life savings into the Ford Motor Company. She can only afford to pay for her groceries because of the dividends Ford Motor Company pays for her. Again, there's a lot of people invested in those companies. They're actually, in terms of real world examples, there are many businesses and many 401ks that are tied up into Ford, including retirees. There are a lot of people who rely on those dividends.
Dividends are just throwing money at Wall Street.
You could buy Ford stock today. It's literally, what is it? It's under $15 per share last time I checked. Let's see, Ford stock today. And again, by the time this is published, it might be a little out. Even a better deal. Well, again, I'm not financial advice. It's under $12 per share, and the dividend yield is 5.23%. So again, there are some people who are going to buy that stock just because they pay those dividends. And any beautiful thing about publicly traded companies, anyone, if you believe in that company, you can invest in it. So anyone can invest in these companies. It's not just the cliche thing that people talk about in terms of Wall Street and fat cats investing in these businesses. There's a lot of hardworking Americans who just set aside $20 a month or $30 a month to buy publicly traded stocks as part of their long-term retirement plan. But that's not, again, Shawn's playing politics and he's appealing towards his audience. And I suspect, not all, but not insignificant portion of his audience is thinking about a single variable analysis and just thinking about their side of the perspective, their side of the equation. They're not thinking about these other variables that I'm bringing up today.
And I don't have to tell you, lavishing money on people who are already rich doesn't improve the business, and it does not improve the economy. It doesn't make Ford more competitive, and it doesn't secure a future for Ford.
It definitely makes it more competitive. If there's two automotive companies, you're thinking about, where should I place my money? Which, again, investing in a company that has a divorce constantly going on, aka Ford with the UAW and Ford, same with GM and Chrysler, perhaps some people would say that's imprudent to begin with because you're just like in Shark Tank. They don't invest in couples because they get divorced a lot and usually bad relationships. But nevertheless, an incentive to purchase their stock over the competition would be they pay dividends. They give you a direct incentive to buy their stock. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Investing in our members does all that. What Ford is showing us is that the money is there. They just don't want us to have it.
Again, you're not the only person at the table. A wise man once told me, when you're working in business, you're working with a lot of parties involved, especially in business-to-business sales. A good saying is, everyone at the table gets to eat. And that's true for the shareholders as well. Again, he doesn't want to admit it because, again, that's not his audience. They didn't vote for him. I understand what he's doing here. But, again, they deserve to eat too.
They constantly make statements about a sustainable future, but actions speak louder than words. What's unsustainable is taking the billions we generate in profit and handing them directly to Wall Street. They're telling us there's no more money while they loot the company through the back door. So let's talk about what happened this week at GM, Stellantis, and compare that to Ford. With no new plants out, both companies put a lot more money on the table. That's because they know if they don't move, there will be serious consequences.
The best relationships are extortion-based. A situation.
But it's a balancing act. As we see at Ford, we took their biggest plan out, and they haven't come back with anything new. As I've said countless times, our goal is to get the best agreement possible, not to strike randomly just for the hell of it. Our strategy means we escalate if and only if we think it will win big. So let's look at where we are across the big three. Under wages, at all three companies as of this week, we have a 23% raise on the table. That's up from 20% just a few days ago and up from 9% when they made their first offer. The companies keep saying they hit their limit, and then their limit went up, and we think there's more ground to gain. On the wage tiers, at all three companies, we have killed massive wage tiers.
Wow.
This is a major win.
Which, again, let me know in the comments, do you think that's fair or not? It's fascinating. I love hearing stories about some people who have direct stories working at the UAW at one of the plants where they think this is a great idea. Some people hate it. Personally, because I like to work like hell, I always think I'm, just based on my work ethic and my acumen, depending on the application what I'm doing, I like to think I'm worth more than the guy who just started 2 weeks ago. But some people want there to be kind of a flat rate.
Been a major priority. We believe in equal pay for equal work. At Stellantis, Mopar workers will make production wages. At GM, the CCA and GMCH will make production wages. At Ford, Sterling Axle and Rawsonville will make production wages. This represents huge raises for these members and will end the toxic wage tier divide among these members. Looking at the wage...
Which, again, I mean, let me know if you're... It depends, depending on what the job is. Do you think it's fair to have someone who's sitting in an air-conditioned parts room, perhaps, getting paid the same as someone who's sweating, pumping out the body panels for some of these vehicles? Again, some people in the I'd be fascinated to hear what your particular use case is, your particular opinion is, but it seems to be a point of contention when I make the video for the specific subject when it comes to wage tiers. It's fascinating to see that some people who are pro-union are actually against the wage tiers. Again, more data the better. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Progression. We started these negotiations with a ridiculous 8-year progression. At Ford, we got down to 3 years where it was in the mid-90s. At Stellantis, they're still stuck on a 4-year progression. And at GM, they want the 2-tier progression with 3 years for all current employees and 4 years for future hires. Obviously, that's not going to fly. If Ford can do it, so can GM and Stellantis, and we are not adding a new tier.
Has he ever looked at the 10Ks or the fiscals of all these companies to say they're exactly the same? Again, people keep forgetting, GM is still in long-term debt. Partially because they went bankrupt so bad in 2009, in part because of the high cost of the UAW and all the myriad of benefits they had. So let's just look it up really quick. Right here now. What's GM long-term debt? All right, so this is according to macrotrends.com, looking at GM long-term debt 2010 to 2023. So they're saying, again, this is from macrotrends.net, General Motors' long-term debt for the quarter ending June 30th, 2023 was $81.37 billion, a 4.22 increase year over year. Jeez Louise, it's like the U.S. government. Every year it's gone up. Jeez Louise. So, again, if you're in long-term debt, depending on what interest rates you get, it may or may not make sense if you're trying to reinvest into a new factory. I know there's a lot of variables, but every year they're getting more in debt. Do you think they can afford much more?
With cost of living, at Ford, we have won cost of living back to where it was in 2009. something we were told was impossible. At GM, we're really close with some tweaks left to make. And at Stellantis, we've still got a deficient COLA on the table that doesn't kick in for the first year. In regards to profit sharing, at all three companies, we've been able to beat back concessionary profit sharing proposals. At Ford, we've actually enhanced it, and temp workers with 90 days will now be eligible. At GM, we've maintained profit sharing but added eligibility for temps with 1,000 hours on the job. At Stellantis, we've maintained but haven't yet won eligibility for temp workers. In looking at temps, we're fighting to end the abuse of so-called temp workers who make low wages and have fewer rights and little security. At Ford, we've raised the temp wage to $21 an hour and won conversion of all current temps with 90 days worked or 90 days in.
Again, it's not going to be great for people who want to progress. They're trying to again, it's kind of controlling the market, very similar to the aviation industry and that union. The reason why it's so hard for young people to actually get a job in the aviation commercial sense is the unions want to keep out the youth, they keep out the other talent, so this artificially inflates the wages. In this case, they're disincentivizing the big three to use temp workers, which again, depending on the application, is going to be detrimental to their production.
At GM, we've also hit $21 an hour for temps, with all the temps who have a year in getting immediately converted to full-time. At Stellantis, the temp wage is still at $20 an hour, and we're going to convert thousands of temps. At all three, we're still negotiating a pathway for future temps to get converted to end the abuse of these members. We're fighting hard to win language across the big three that will make sure that temporary work is just that, temporary. Looking at job security, one of our biggest proposals on job security has been the right to strike over plant closures. They can't keep closing plants without any consequences. At Ford and Stellantis, we've won that right. We will keep our jobs secure with the most powerful weapon we have, the strike threat. At GM, the company still won't grant it. Looking at work-life balance, at all three companies, we've won additional holiday, the Juneteenth holiday, and 2 weeks of paid parental leave, a first for our members at the big three. There's still room to grow there. In retirement, we know we need to fix our broken retirement system at the big three. All three companies are now offering a $3 increase to the pension multiplier and boosting the 401k through GM, although GM lags behind. Ford and Stellantis are offering 9.5% employer contribution to the 401k, and GM is offering just 8%.
That's ridiculously good. I know people in the tech industry who aren't getting those types of benefits.
For current retirees, Ford is offering a $250 annual lump sum payment, and GM just a one-time $1,000 lump sum payment. Stellantis isn't offering anything on that front. The skilled trades tool allowance, all three companies are now at $1.50 tool allowance for skilled trades. So what's the punchline? This week, GM and Stellantis got the message loud and clear. They hurried to catch up with Ford. But GM in particular is worrying. They tell us they need a 2-tier wage progression because they expect to do a lot of hiring. At the same time, they threaten product and won't give us the right to strike over plant closures. I wonder how members in Arlington and Flint Truck feel about that. Stellantis has its issues as well. They're still at a 4-year progression. They're still at just $20 for temp workers. They've rejected all increases to retiree pay. I know plenty of members at Sterling Heights Assembly Plant and in Kokomo, Indiana, who aren't going to like that. And Ford is just waiting around, handing out money to Wall Street. I wonder what members at the Rouge thought of Bill Ford's comments implying they might close if we don't settle for what they've offered. The bottom line is we've got cards left to play, and they've got money left to spend. That's the hardest part of a strike. Right before a deal is when there is the most aggressive push for that last mile. They just want to wait us out. They want division. They want fear. They want uncertainty. And what we have is our solidarity. We have great negotiators. We have great staff. And we have the best members in the world. We have plans, we have strategies and tactics to keep winning at the table, backed up by some of the most badass unionists in the country. Poll after poll shows we have the overwhelming support of the American public. The U.S. Senate just introduced a resolution to stand with the UAW, and it has bipartisan support. If we stand together, if we have faith, we will win. Not just a good contract, not just a record contract, but a contract that turns the tide. A contract that finally starts to make things right at the big three and for auto workers everywhere. Last of all, I just want to remind you all of one thing. We said last week that we're not sticking to Friday expansions. We're going to hit when we need to hit and where we need to hit. This week, we saw the companies try to get in line with one another. Now we need to move that line across all three. Don't let them divide us. Don't let them scare us. And don't let them confuse us. Our cause is just, the money is there, and our strategy is working. Time is on our side, the American public is on our side, and the facts are on our side. So be ready and stay ready to stand up. Thank you.
Well, interesting speech, Mr. Shawn Fain. Now, he says time is on their side, but as he says that, does anyone want a vehicle made by the big three right about now? Economic uncertainty, the automotive market is kind of stagnant. Anecdotally speaking, I went to the dealership to have some work done on my vehicle. Now, thankfully, it's just simple maintenance because it's a Honda. And again, it's anecdotal evidence, it's one dealer, but I went on a Saturday. And because I'm one of those folks where I like to use my time wisely, I wasn't going to drop off my car and have it come back and pick it up. So I stayed there for a couple hours with my work computer, just kind of working on a couple of upcoming episodes and my IT company. I was there for a few hours. Most of the sales reps were just sitting around. They're usually Saturdays, in terms of dealership activity, that's when people are coming to view. They're coming physically to come view vehicles. You have the sales reps walking up to them and helping them. It's usually busy as can be. It was pretty darn dead. I think partially because the huge interest rates, the uncertainty of everyone wondering if they'll have a job next. I mean, we talk about it all the time on this show. Most of these companies are laying people off. Geico just laid off 6% of their workforce, about 2,000 employees. I mean, a lot of these companies are laying people off because of economic uncertainty. And at the same time, they want a record contract, which I'm sure they'll get. It's just a matter of how much are they going to get and how much can these companies realistically give before they can't afford to reinvest in themselves, and subsequently maybe they'll go bankrupt again. So, interesting enough, let me know in the comments. Again, I wish I could give you more feedback on what people think, but the video disables the comments on their end. Now, they have the live chat on the side of the screen, and most of those, interestingly enough, many of them want to push Shawn to go on a full strike. And some of them, again, this is anecdotal evidence, this is one live stream, a couple of folks saying, let us vote. A lot of people, many people saying, let us vote. A lot of people saying, increase the strike, do a full walkout. Now, in terms of timing and how much they have in their hand, again, they have about 40,000 members currently on strike. And that's $500 per member per week. So each week, they're spending about $20 million of their slush fund to pay people to strike. which, again, if you're a UAW member, that's awesome. Usually that money would be going to politicians trying to kill your jobs, ironically enough, because they do a lot of lobbying. But again, $20 million per week. They had a slush fund of $820 to $850 million. So 800, let's be, it'll be go in the middle. $835 million, let's say they have on hand. Divide by 20 million per week. So that's 41.75 weeks that they could, with the current rate of people not working on the strike, they could pay them to not work. So that's quite a long period of time. How much demand there is for automobiles and how much the big three will care. That's the multi-billion-dollar question. So let me know in the comments, how much more will the big three give in terms of concessions before they just walk away? Do you think they even have the chutzpah, or do they think they'll actually have they'll just actually walk away at all, or they just continue to acquiesce to many of these demands? Eventually there's going to be a breaking point where they just say they can't physically do anything. Again, I pity the person, or perhaps more realistically these days, the software that has to take into account all these different variables in order to see if the latest thing they're going to give to the UAW is going to make or break the company. But it'll be interesting to see. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. It'd be fascinating to hear what you have to say. Now going on to the business blunder of the day, you have Ford Mustang E-Mach, a recall due to customers accelerating, which from the manufacturer's perspective, in their defense, who would have thought someone would buy a Mustang E-Mach and actually want to accelerate? I mean, it's an EV SUV. Would you ever want to go over 20 miles an hour? I mean, I'm like partially kidding, but there are actually some folks who actually attempting to enjoy this vehicle, and they try to go as fast as you can, which, again, who doesn't want to do that with a new vehicle? Now, apparently they're recalling just a couple of those EVs, just a couple. That's a joke. It's quite a bit, actually. They're recalling nearly 35,000 Ford Mustang E-Mach EVs, which, again, terrible marketing, for manufactured between 2021 and 2020 due to an issue from a key propulsion system component that potentially can't handle the heat from fast charging, or when the drivers floor it too many times in a row. So if you enjoy your vehicle, or in this case you're attempting to enjoy a vehicle, you will subsequently break it, which is ridiculous. Especially, I was going to say, every time you're at a red light, again, I'm not giving legal advice or driving advice, many people would say that's an opportunity to, well, I would say traditionally burn off the carbon in your cylinders, but in this case, melt down your battery. Now, when asked for continued comment, they said, quote, overheating may lead to arcing and deformation of the electrical contact surfaces, which can result in a contactor that is prevented from closing, or a contactor that welds closed, unquote. So, rudimentarily speaking, EV not good. Which, again, this is a terrible... Oh, I was going to say, now you have to wait 28 weeks to get the new part in because of the strike. Or, again, I'm not saying you should buy an EV because, well, personally, I like to have an ROI where the vehicle lasts my lifetime, basically. Or, in theory, longer. But could just buy a Tesla. They haven't had too many detrimental recalls. I mean, they've all had recalls, don't get me wrong, and many people will make fun of them because the body panel gaps are an ongoing joke to many people. But again, this is supposed to be their crown jewel of EVs. That's why they gave it the Mustang name. I should say gave. They stole it, more appropriately, from the iconic V8 stick shift Mustang that you and I love that actually makes the company money. They took that name, they put it on, slapped it on a little EV SUV. This was what was going to bring them into the EV world. This is their flagship EV model. This is them saying, hey, this is our big move. We're giving it the best name we have. We're going to put all of our engineering resources behind it. This is going to put our name on the map. And it kind of did. But you see the sales are decreasing more and more, I think partially because of the economy, partially because a lot of people can't afford a disposable vehicle, or in a vehicle that only one manufacturer can work on. Because, again, that's going to increase cost. Well, any EV vehicle as well. But now you have an issue where if you actually try to accelerate it all those times, so it's going to be a nice little recall. Does this change your perception of Ford's transformation? Again, they're trying to go all in on EV. They created a whole new division at the company, which subsequently is the only division losing money. But again, it's a startup with many new startups. You don't make money for several fiscal quarters. And long term, it will probably make a profit, just like Tesla. After many years, they did get to the point where they're making profit. So Let me know in the comments, will this slow down the consumer's perception of the brand? Well, they just won't want a Mustang E-Mach anymore. Granted, the number of those people are probably 18 at most. Partially. I was going to say kidding a little bit, kind of. Not really. Well, it'll be interesting to see. Let me know. Does that change your perception? Would you ever buy one with this given new data? Or maybe will it continue to be the flagship brand? I almost felt like I had salt in my mouth then. I said the brand of Ford is now the Mustang E-Mach. To me, the brand of Ford is going to be the F-150, the one that will last a long time because it has an internal combustion engine, and the Mustang with 3 pedals, also known as a manual transmission, also known as the best way to enjoy any vehicle. But that's just me, 3 cents. But to have your flagship model have a huge recall because they simply accelerated, that's got to be the business blunder of the day. Thank you again, everyone, for taking the time in to do today. Don't forget to take time to like, subscribe, and comment. Again, I'm trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of October, so you can click that button. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, the comments and the feedback make the show better and better, and I appreciate it, even if it's critical, because that's how you improve the most, I would argue. Also, and lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.